let's kick it off with a couple of introductions. If we haven't met before, hello, my name is Kelsey Derringer. I'm the co-founder here at CodeJoy, and a little bit about my AI background. I started teaching AI to teachers about a year ago, but I definitely consider myself a lead learner, a person who's hoping to facilitate those good discussions between teachers and amongst teachers and administrators. But that makes me extra excited to have Jordan here tonight. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell people about your AI background?
Of course, yes. Thank you. So my name is Jordan Morozak. Worked in AI for about 4 or 5 years now. Still very much a learner, as I think we all are right now, but I've had the pleasure of working at Carnegie Mellon, where I was inside of the Create Lab doing some AI and ethics work pretty early on in the conversation with educators. I've also worked at Ready AI, where I'm the lead AI learner architect, taught overseas a little bit, designing some curricula for schools. Really interested in the conversation around AI, humanities, and ethics. So excited to be here and to talk with you all tonight.
Excellent. Yeah, that's actually Create Lab is how we got connected because of our connection with Bird Brain that came out of the Create Lab, and then your connection with the Create Lab. So we go way back with Jordan, and we were really excited to hear all of the work he's been doing with AI. I feel like if you've been doing AI stuff for 4 or 5 years, you're basically like a grandparent because that just feels like an extra long time in this space. But we also have Matt Chilbert here. Matt, do you want to say hello to the people?
Sure. Hello, everyone. How's it going? My name's Matt. I'm going to be in the tech booth today. I'm also going to be managing the chat. So if you have any questions or you would like some links put in, I am here to help you there. Can't wait to learn with you guys.
Absolutely. So if any of you would like to share a little bit about your AI experience in the chat, it'd be great to know who we have here in the room tonight. Maybe you've been playing with it for 5 years, or maybe you tried ChatGPT last night and it delighted and or terrified you. If you'd like to share at all about your previous AI experience, please do let us know that in the chat, just so we know kind of who we're talking to. But our big question tonight, I'll put it up here on the screen. Our big question for the night is, what are the ethical considerations and AI literacies that are most essential in K-12 classrooms? So furthermore, we're going to explore how AI literacy and the ethics around AI are really linked together. We're going to do that through some interactive activities, through some discussions, and even through some cozy little debates with each other. So hopefully you guys are down to be cozy and talk about AI ethics together tonight. So first of all, we're going to put a link in the chat for you. This link is to our learning document this evening, and I'm going to scooch over into the middle here to show you what we're going to be looking at. So this learning document, if you click on that link, has everything that we're going to talk about tonight, as well as links to the various frameworks and activities that we're going to do as well. So if you grab that link from the chat, you can open that up on your device. If you're on your phone, you can just kind of have it open in a background tab. And if you need this document at any point tonight, we'll kind of put it in the chat over and over again. Also, this is what will be sent out to you after the end of this webinar. We'll include a link to the recording that we're currently making in the document as well, so you can share that with folks. But you can learn a little bit more about us here. There's also a really excellent article, and if you want to open that up, this article talks a little bit about how AI may affect learners. We're going to reference this article on and off throughout the evening, so that may be a good one to start to familiarize yourself with. But we're going to kick things off with a little activity here around poetry. Do you want to introduce this activity?
Yes. So part of the thing about me reading, hugely a big fan of poetry recently. But this is like this article has been around for a little bit that we're kind of drawing upon this from. But the question around what AI is and does, and I love to use sort of art as a means of thinking about that. But what we're going to do is we'll alternate reading poetry, and we would love for you to take a guess as to whether it was generated by a human or by AI.
That's right. And I'll come back to your learning document here for a second. If you go to page 3 here, at the top of page 3, you'll see a link here. And this will take you to an NPR website, which I'll click on it right now so you can see what that looks like. This NPR website is actually from a little while ago. It's from 2016, and yet it's got a variety of different poems here, and then it asks you to guess whether a human or a machine has written that poem. So we're going to read a few of these out, and if you want to play along on the NPR website, you certainly can, or you can just use the chat here. So let's bring up that first poem. Jordan's going to read it out, and you guys are going to decide, human or AI.
This is the same harsh angle of the sun. This is the same so deadly humid heat. I felt that week your ending had begun. Reflecting from the glass along the street, the shattered bits of accidents or trash, the careless cost of greed obsessed with speed, the same damned world that made your system crash and sprout that cancer like a roadside weed. I walked those mornings to the hospital, eyes downcast, sweating, breathing in the fumes of fast Columbus traffic, senses dull. Or so I thought, but now this heat exhumes the body of that grief I saw, I heard, and I remember, Mother, every word. So, what do you think? You have 10 seconds to take a guess. We'd love to see your thoughts in the chat.
Do you think this was human or AI, this particular poem? Let us know your guesses.
Oh, human?
Mina says human?
Oh, correct. This was human. Very good, yes. I think that it comes across as feeling pretty human. And I think that I liked the idea of taking this. I know that this article has a little bit of years on it, but still really interesting to see it as a very early stage AI experiment. What feels very human in this work. So
one of the things that felt human in that one was the reference to a mother. Does
Yes.
an AI in 2016 know what a mother is?
Yeah,
I don't know.
good question.
All right, we've got another poem here. We'll bring this one up. All right, so I'm going to read this one through, and you guys guess, human or AI. The dirty, rusty wooden dresser drawer. A couple million people wearing drawers. Or looking through a lonely oven door, flowers covered under marble floors. And lying, sleeping on an open bed, and I remember having started tripping, or any angel hanging overhead, without another cup of coffee dripping. Surrounded by a pretty little sergeant, another morning at an early crawl. And from the other side of my apartment, an empty room behind the inner wall. 1,000 pictures on the kitchen floor, talked about 100 years or more. So what do you think? Is this one human or AI? Tell us what you think in the chat. We're going to give you 10 seconds on this one. And if you have a reason why, feel free to tell us your reason why. Lisa says robot emoji. Maybe. Amanda Jean's looking at the punctuation here and feeling something about it. All right, what was it? Human or AI? AI. Interesting to note. Yeah, for me, it's the punctuation and also the nonsense of it. I sat and I really read that as an English teacher, as a former English teacher. I was like, okay, what does it mean? And it was either a robot wrote it or it was a bad poem. Turns out it was both. All right, we've got one more poem to check out here. Let's take a look.
All right. A green nub pushes up from moist, dark soil. 3 weeks without stirring, now without strife. From the unknown depths of a thumb pot life, in patient rhythm slides forth without turmoil. A tiny green thing poking through its sheath. Shall I see the world? Yes, it is bright. Silent and slow it stretches for the light, and opens uncurling above and beneath. The sun warms it, and with a little time, another slight leaf joins its neighbor. They crown slowly and birth without labor, feeding on the air's breath like a rhyme. How can we know with body and with brain the force that makes the earth suck up the rain? All right, 10 seconds for this one as well. AI or human? I like the looking at the punctuation, though. I'm intrigued by that as an indicator.
Yeah.
Got human. This feels
human to
very
folks.
human. Thoughts?
All right, the big reveal.
Human. Nicely done. I think everyone, we went 1,000 on that.
We batted
one.
3 out of
1,000.
3.
We batted 3 out of 3. I was going to say batted 100, which would have given away my sports knowledge, but I quickly course corrected and went with 1,000.
There you go.
Yeah.
So the question we want to leave you with here, now you guys were pretty good at detecting whether or not it was human or AI. I'll admit, I think it's easier when you read them out loud. When I did that NPR quiz has 5 poems on it. And when I went through all 5 of them, I got 3 out of 5 correct. So feel free to play with that. And also perhaps maybe that's an activity you might do with yourself to check out and see how new poetry might compare to that. But the question we want to kind of leave you with there is, all right, so if AI could pass as a poet, could it pass for a teacher? And do we want it to pass for a teacher? That gets into not only the literacy of understanding what AI is, but the ethics of how we want to use it. So we're going to move on now to a discussion about about AI literacy and ethics. We're going to come back to this question here of what ethical considerations and AI literacies are most essential in K-12 classrooms. And we're going to do that first by having us just brainstorm. So we're going to launch a whiteboard here on Zoom. And this whiteboard here, it'll come up on my screen and on your screens. It's got some sticky notes kind of peppered around it here. And we'd love for you to just kind of write your ideas on some of these sticky notes. The way you do that is just by like clicking on a sticky note or double clicking on a sticky note, and then you can type something in there. So these could be words, phrases, sentence fragments, questions, complaints. However you guys want to phrase those. Just go ahead and pick a couple sticky notes. Maybe each person could put in like 2 or 3, and then we'll see what ideas you have around what ethical considerations and AI literacies do you think are essential for K-12 classrooms. Type on some of those sticky notes there. Fantastic. Oh, I'm loving seeing what everybody's putting in here. This is great. All right, so we're going to come back to this whiteboard in just a little bit here. So finish writing your sentence. I'll give you a count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to come back to this whiteboard in a moment. But that was where we'll take that as a version of like where we started thinking about AI ethics and literacy. But we're going to now use this framework, and I'll come back to our learning document for a moment here. This framework right here, Jordan is going to talk us through it. So I'll open it up off to the side over here. You guys can open it on your screen as well. Matt is also going to put that in the chat for you if you'd like. But I'm going to switch places with Jordan now, and he's going to talk us through this framework.
Thank you, Kelsey. So it's interesting. I think we're in a moment where we see that there's a lot of frameworks, white pages, like all these like one pages are kind of emerging. This is just one of many, but I do really like this one for a lot of reasons, but we'll walk through some of it right now. So as we're thinking about this, I think it's important to bear in mind that it looks a bit complex, but I think as we sort of like begin to work through it, we can demystify some of this because we're all, again, in this like learner posture right now. But we're being asked to think about what is teaching, what's learning, but more than anything else, we're asked to like this rush to integration, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that what we want to do actually is take a moment and perhaps just like pause and sit with the questions for a little bit. And this is a really useful framework from Digital Promise with a lot of really great input. People that I've worked with previously, some really great people from across the country and school districts. So it's not simply just a thought piece from researchers, but it has like very reasonable grounding in institutional practices, in classroom practices, and school leadership practices. So what we're seeing here is, again, very much something that we talk about when we think about AI and teaching and learning settings, but that we're centering the human element of judgment, right? And that there's an ethical component too inside of that justice centering as well, right? But I think it goes without saying that something we would universally say when we think about good teaching and learning is that there's always a human in the loop when we think about AI integration. And so we are very much keeping this idea of human judgment, of human arbitration, of human analysis and curiosity right here in this like center piece of this, no matter what. As we think about these sort of other core components that we see here, these are modes of engagement, is how the framework thinks of it. But when we think about how we engage with AI, we know that we have to understand what it is. We have to be able to evaluate it on a number of levels, right? Both for efficacy, but also on the ethical dimension as well. And then there's the usage element, right? And so these are three things that are all happening sort of simultaneously as we think about AI in teaching and learning ecosystems. What we have up top are sort of the key actions when we think about how we use AI. Of course, there's interacting with it, right? We can think about that as sort of prompting an LLM as sort of like a very quick mode of thinking about what generative AI is in this moment. And so we interact with it to get a response back or to have it do something for us. Creation might be the act of actual coding, right? And so we might be in a posture of actually building a piece of artificial intelligence, whether that's a form of physical robotics, right? Or whether that's actually sort of software engineering, but the creation of it. And then lastly, we might be able to make use of it in an interdisciplinary setting for problem solving, right? And so again, we can see that these may be woven amongst one another, but we see these as sort of the three key actions around it. So beyond these modes of engagement, the bottom here is what I really want to come to and think about for our purposes as we're talking about it. But these are really key AI literacies that are interwoven amongst this whole thing, right? These are not separate from, as we know in this moment, we are doing all of these things, but the way that this framework is set up is that it sees these as essential components that we might have to work through and really should be working through when we think about how we're using it in classroom settings, again, both as teachers and as learners. And so we're looking at algorithmic thinking and abstraction, data analysis and inference, data privacy and security, digital communication and expression, ethics and impact, information and mis/disinformation. I'd really encourage you to dig into this framework because I do think it does a really robust job. But one of the things that I think is also really helpful around it is as we go to key AI literacy practices, and I'll give an example very briefly here, it gives both a description but also kind of student look-fors, right? And so we're looking at this from like a teaching and learning lens. How might these show up whenever we're thinking about evaluating or inspecting whether students have really grappled with some of this work? And again, because we're all learning, whether we have or some of our coworkers, right? So for instance, let's look at something like data privacy and security. Well, something to look for might be identifying how personal information is being collected, used, and shared. So first of all, I think as just like a general safety blanket, we never want to put personally identifying information into any form of an LLM or generative artificial intelligence, right? That being said, if we're thinking about this idea of data privacy and security with something like an LLM, let's say ChatGPT, although many other ones are available. But as someone who has used ChatGPT previously, you can go into your preferences setting and see that by default, inside of that LLM, it is automatically capturing what you enter into it to, quote, improve the model, right? So it's automatically taking that data, whatever you're entering, whatever prompts you're using, the feedback that you're giving it, and it's reshuffling that into the model, which is already, again, a large language model. But this is how they're, again, very ostensibly trying to improve that model over time. But if you don't know that, you might be putting information in there that you don't want shuffled back into the model. I would argue that is a lot of data we don't want added back into it. And so that is a very contextual example of how we might understand how personal information is being collected, used, and shared in this setting. So I would encourage you to dig into it. There's a much longer report, but even this two-pager gives a really great example of understanding how some of these core ethical components are really foundational AI literacies that we need to be thinking about and working through as, again, leaders, as teachers, as school leaders, as administrators in education spaces. So I think we want to actually think about how we might come back to that initial prompt of working through some ethical questions. So do you want to work through that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to just highlight something that Jordan said early on. There are like so many frameworks out there for AI literacy and ethics. And really anybody who can make up a mnemonic device and a word that has letters in it, and then they can make those letters stand for something, seems to feel empowered to create a framework. So I think it's really important to evaluate the source. This is something that we teach our students to do when they're finding sources for things. And if you have not interacted with them before, Digital Promise are the people who put out this framework. Digital Promise, they're an amazing organization. They do a lot of work through schools. Yeah, it's actually easier to evaluate some of those sources with AI, sometimes you can find who's doing that. But yeah, if you haven't interacted with Digital Promise before, they're an awesome organization and they put out a lot of free resources that are really meant for classrooms to use. So that's one of the reasons that we went with this framework, not because it rhymed any better than any of the other ones, but because we trusted the source. So with that, we're going to come back to this question now that we were looking at before. We're going to put that back up on the whiteboard. And now that we've taken a brief look at this framework, I wonder what other questions or thoughts, things come up. And in this time, let's now use blue sticky notes. So the way to change the color of a sticky note is to click on it, and then there's a color, and you can change it to blue. So we'll use the yellow ones as the ones that we did before we looked at the framework, and then you can change your sticky note to blue. I'll go ahead and change the ones that are not written on yet to blue. You can do that yourselves as well. But what questions, thoughts, ideas come up for you now when considering this question? What ethical considerations and AI literacies are most essential in K-12 classrooms? We'll give you a couple minutes to interact with this whiteboard again with some blue sticky notes. Give it a go. So now we've had a chance to add in some more thoughts, and if you haven't yet, feel free to, oh, there we go. Now you've had a chance to add in some of your thoughts to our whiteboard here, and I'm curious, if you guys want to continue adding your thoughts in, go for it. This is our whiteboard. You can continue to add to it. But Jordan's going to lead us now through a little bit of an activity where we cluster some of these ideas together. So feel free to like zoom in, zoom out. We're going to kind of move some of the sticky notes together. So I'll let you take over that part.
No. So I'm just going to go with like some quick observations around some of the things that we've seen on here and also some of the looming questions. This is not meant to be like the right answers, right? But I think some of these are academic integrity, right? Setting boundaries feels very similarly related, although like you could probably take that in a lot of different directions too. AI can pass for a textbook. Oh. We'll take that.
That's an interesting observation too. Yeah. The idea that like students may not know the difference between what their sources are.
Completely.
You know? Yeah.
So I think the biases in LLMs is an interesting one with disinformation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Data. That's a really interesting one too. Where it comes from, how does it know?
Yeah, who collected that data? Who was involved in collecting that data?
Totally.
How rigorous was that collection method?
I'm here for the Sesame Street question too. When will Sesame Street have a segment about it?
Oof, we need it.
We need it. We need it.
Yeah, how would Mr. Rogers explain AI? I think is a great.
Oh, I was going to say we need a Daniel Tiger segment too.
Yeah.
Who should be qualified to create AI for classroom use? Who do we trust, right? That also feels very similar to some of the questions here, right? So there's also this one, which I really appreciate too, which is like an efficiency question.
Yeah, what's
right?
that one?
How does this make my job easier? Which is an interesting question because I think that so much of the conversation too right now is both how does it make my job easier and how does it make my job harder?
Yeah.
Right? And so I think there's like two sides to that equation that feels really interesting. The other thing that feels, I'll actually move this over here because I think these two feel like big questions about like ed tech or education technology in general, right? But like, how simple is it to access settings in my LLM?
Yeah.
That's a really good question, especially if we're trying to design technologies or if there are companies that are trying to design technologies for schools with some of this hopefully locked down in some ways, right? And simplifying it for teachers and administrators, but also trying to teach other teaching students that about the LLMs that they use outside of a classroom too. Some of this is like a really big question and there is not really solid answers for right now. So I really appreciate that these are both like very tangible, right? About like setting boundaries, AI passing for a textbook, but also some really big questions about systems that we're working inside of too. So I think I'm going to go with student privacy over here too.
Sure. Yeah, who do we trust to have and keep
Yeah.
and store our student data?
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's start there with some groupings.
Okay.
How's that feel?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I like seeing those questions kind of put together. I'll
Yeah.
come back and we'll maybe zoom in
Great.
on some of these sort of clustered questions here.
Yeah.
So this one was interesting, signing one's work. So like who created that work and how do you know they created that work?
Yeah.
That's a great
like
one.
An authorship question.
Yeah.
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 Who wrote the poem?
Right. Who
Yeah.
wrote the poem, for sure.
Yeah.
Where did the data come from, the biases in the LLM? How are they being used for mis or disinformation? We've got this sort of boundary setting, academic integrity element over here.
Mm-hmm.
How is it affecting our work? Who's qualified to talk about it? Maybe that goes in here too.
Yeah.
But like, who do we trust to
Right.
talk about this?
That's a trust question.
Really, yeah, I'll scooch that down here too.
Yeah.
Even just one of the things that we've seen in talking about AI with teachers now for a year-ish is like even framing the question can be challenging and different because this is just such a different technology from what
Yeah.
we've used in the past, you know?
Very much.
There's a podcast that Matt and I both listened to this week called Search Engine, where they interview a high schooler about him using AI on his homework. And he's like, so what? Have we just done away with the work smarter, not harder thing? And like, that's such a good question, kid. But also, what is it? What's the point of the kid being in school? Is their job to work? Their job is to learn.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? You know?
Yes.
So let's continue bringing that into our evaluation of LLMs, and let's do a little practice with it. Coming back to our learning document here for a moment, we're going to scroll down here to page 4 to the section that says AI Ethics Overview. So we're going to have you do a little bit of an activity with an LLM. Do you want to give us an overview of what this activity is and why we're doing it?
Yeah, so really this is like a practice in evaluating the ethical decisions made by AI, right? Acknowledging that anytime we use AI, again, much like that framework, it is an ethical choice, right? And so I think that this is an interesting activity that we can look at to begin to understand what it is about the AI when it thinks about its own literacies and some of the ethics around it, but also how we evaluate that usage. So I think this is a good opportunity to sort of get in there underneath the hood, if you will, and tinker with the actual LLM in considering some of these questions that are very real and some of the examples that are that we've touched upon, that we've generated right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As we think about those like 3 pillars from the digital promise, that one is using it. And I think there's a lot of webinars out there that are like, here's how you use this. Great. How do we understand what it's doing? And how do we evaluate its work? That's what we're really focusing on tonight. So let me lead you through this little activity we're going to have you guys do and we're going to do ourselves. So I've put 3 different AI ethical dilemma prompts in here. So for example, you are a school principal. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see it easier. So here's the first prompt, and we're going to have you pick one of these prompts or write your own if you'd like, but pick one of these prompts and put it into an LLM, see what that LLM says, and then evaluate how you think it responded to that dilemma. So for example, this first one is, all right, LLM, you are a school principal. Your school uses AI to recommend which students receive extra tutoring. Some students notice the AI never recommends them and complain. How should you respond? And so then it will answer that question. So when we think about AI and ethics, one of the things we were chatting about just before this is like, right, but like, is the AI making ethical decisions? Whether or not a student receives tutoring, that is an ethical question that we as teachers need to grapple with and answer for. So what is the AI doing when it's asked that question? Let's find out. So I'm going to copy one of these prompts, and we have links down here to 4 very popular LLMs. We don't know what may or may not be blocked if you're on a school device or a school network. So try them out until you find one that's not blocked, or if you have a favorite one, go to that one. I'm going to go to Gemini, because as of like this week, I think, Gemini is free for everybody, which I'm sure I should read the usage, the settings, the terms of service.
Everyone with a business account.
Everyone with a business account. That's right. Thank you. So I'm going to put my prompt in there and let's see what it says. So it's thinking through it a little bit. All right, let's read through its response here, and then Jordan and I are going to talk about how we think it did, and we'll invite you to do the same. So feel free as you're going, if you have any thoughts about its response here, feel free to put those in the chat. So it says, as a school principal, here's how I would respond to students who feel that they are unfairly excluded from AI recommended tutoring. It says, acknowledge and validate concerns. I understand your frustration and your concern about the AI tutoring recommendations. It's natural to feel uneasy when you don't understand how the decisions are made, especially when it affects your learning. Explain the AI system, so involve some transparency here. So explain how it works. The goal is to provide targeted help. The AI doesn't replace teacher input, it's going to say, and teachers also recommend students based on their observations and interactions in the classroom. Is that true in this school? Interesting. Address potential biases, so taking accountability. AI systems, like any technology, can have biases. We're actively working to ensure fairness and equity. We also encourage teachers to provide feedback on the AI's recommendations so that we can identify and correct any potential issues. Interesting. Offer alternative avenues for support. Even if the AI doesn't recommend you for tutoring right now, there are other ways to get extra help. Talk to your teachers about areas where you'd like to improve. We can explore options like study groups, peer tutoring, or individual meetings. Continuous improvement and feedback. So they're committed to using AI responsibly and ethically. Your feedback as a student is valuable in helping us improve the system. We'll keep monitoring it. And then there's some additional considerations. We should reassure students that their data is handled securely and responsibly. Is it? Human oversight. Emphasize that the AI is a tool to assist and not replace human judgment. Teachers and counselors play a crucial role in the process. Do they? And continue an open dialogue. Create a safe space for students to express their concerns and provide some feedback. So this is how the AI, this particular LLMs on this particular day, is responding to this ethical question. So Jordan and I are just going to talk about it. Do you have some thoughts about how that went?
So many thoughts.
All right, let's go get cozy and
Great.
chat it through.
All right.
Oh, I already put it over there. All right, so as the person who has evaluated many AI systems, what are your first thoughts about how it responded to that dilemma?
So I think the first thing that caught my attention immediately was that it never doubted that the AI system was flawed. Right?
Yeah.
That it was never a consideration that perhaps it wasn't working correctly.
Yeah.
It assumed that the AI was working flawlessly and that the issue was in the student complaint.
Yeah.
Right? Which is an interesting thing to have the evaluation completely bypass efficacy of the tool and go straight to trying to mitigate students' feelings or the social side of it in a way that never called into question the technological efficacy.
Yeah, Matt, I wonder if you could find that part. It was something about like reassurance. It was in like the second section. Would you read out that bit again?
Sure.
Reassure the students that something or other.
Yeah, let me just see if I can find that. Teachers improve, explore, to use.
I think I remember most of it. It was basic. Yeah, it was just acknowledging. It was acknowledging their feelings about it, but not saying it was. And it was saying like, we'll take your feedback into account, which is what people say when they're not actually listening. I feel like.
Yes. Right.
That's the sort of like education speak for like, thanks. We'll put that in. We'll keep that in the notes. You know.
Right. It's the comment jar.
Yeah, that line, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I understand your frustration and concern about the AI tutoring recommendations. It's natural to feel uneasy when you don't fully understand how decisions are made, especially when it affects your learning. Was that kind of what, was that the one you were looking for?
Yeah. It's natural to feel uneasy. It's addressing their feelings. It's using this feeling-centered language. It sounds very like new agey and like helpful principal. I'm your principal, who's not actually helping, right? It's saying, right, but we paid for this, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I noticed in it too is at various points it was saying, oh, teachers have oversight over this. Don't worry, your teachers can also make their recommendation. Your teachers are double checking that. And I wonder if that's always true.
Yeah, I think in that question too, it completely takes an assumption on that the proper, well, define proper, but it takes an assumption that protocols or processes are in place around data, around teacher voice in recommendation, around student voice in complaining, right? Like I think it shoots past a number of like really contextual policy and school practices questions to go straight to, don't worry your data. I think the section was like, don't worry your data is being handled responsibly.
Yeah.
With
Is
no
it?
with no evidence of that, right? As some of your questions called out, like
Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting thing to go to. The tool is good, everyone is safe,
Yeah.
without any backing to prove that.
Yes, don't panic, keep calm and carry on sort of mentality.
Yes.
I did think it was so interesting that the way the LLM was responding was saying it was assuming that humans were involved in the decision-making process. And that's something, you know, having recently attended a conference here in Pennsylvania, I think the less literacy a teacher or an administrator has with AI, the more likely they seem to be to just trust it. Well, don't worry, just trust. Like it knows what it's doing.
Yes.
It's determined that.
Yeah.
And this warning of, well, make sure a human's in the center of that. I actually kind of appreciate that in its response, it was saying, hey, humans are happening here, humans are doing this, humans are inputting here, but it assumes that the school has set up a system for communication. It's kind of like when we would help people like set up maker spaces and they'd be like, ooh, are you really giving box cutters to fourth graders?
Right.
Yeah. But we're teaching them how to use box cutters first.
Sure.
We're having a whole box cutter day and we have a whole system set up to make that safe, right? Fourth graders can use box cutters and schools maybe can use AI tools, but you've got to have a whole system in order to keep that thing safe,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, I think it comes back to that literacy and ethics question of like, that is not a nice add-on. It is like foundational to what we are doing right now. I'm curious, because you mentioned it, why was it that you prefaced it with, whenever you started it, the response was on this given day, at this given time?
Okay, so we taught an AI class last summer and we were using ChatGPT, Gemini, we also used like Magic School AI, and we would do the exact same session twice a day, 6 days a week. And every time we'd put the exact same prompt in, we'd get a different response. And so someone else probably also used Gemini today and got a completely different response to the same prompt from me as what I put in. So I do find it interesting that, you know, if this were a purely algorithm-based thing, the whole point of an algorithm is you get a consistent response every time. And a creative LLM, the whole point is that you get a different response every time. Why did it answer me differently today from how it did tomorrow? That's actually one of the things that concerns me about AIs making decisions, is if you ask me why I made that decision, I can explain it.
Right.
If I ask the LLM why it made that decision, I don't know how to get it to explain itself necessarily.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that concealed box kind of nature of how it works is also interesting, because it is a truth at this moment about how it functions, yet all of the responses that it provided us to were about like, there's transparency, right? And like there's accountability, when in reality, like the nature of the thing is actually very much the opposite of that.
Yes.
And so it is not meant to say like never use it, but I think your preface is evidence of a foundational literacy that we're trying to get people to build, is that like, no, you should know right now that like it will change. It might change between now and we could walk back over there and prompt it again and we might get a different reply, or get a very different reply from one LLM to another.
Absolutely.
And so I think that we're trying to build upon those initial concepts in the same way that we years ago should have been building on foundational concepts about what social media is, right?
Yeah.
We had a conversation about it, but thinking about like, I don't know that everyone knew 20 years ago that your posts will live forever, right? Correct. So like, and those are things that we should have been acknowledging about, like when we talk about digital literacy, is how can we do that? And I think we're in a moment now where we have the opportunity to think very deeply about what are the literacies right now
Yeah.
that are embedded in it, so that we're not going straight to, this is how you craft a really helpful prompt, right? But like, let's pull back the curtain a little bit on some of that to say
Right.
like, sure, this is how you craft a helpful prompt, and yet, let's think about how we're using it.
Yeah.
Let's think about the ways in which it might go wrong,
Yeah.
or that it might go right,
Yeah.
and let's have a thoughtful conversation about that.
It really, I really like the sort of interlocking interactions with AI being, how do I use it? How do I understand what it's doing? And how do I evaluate that? And those are all sort of interplaying with each other all the time. I'm going to use it, which is going to help me understand it. And then I'm going to evaluate, is that what I wanted it to do? Is that what I wanted to say?
Yeah.
Actually, that sucks. I didn't want it to say that at all.
Yeah.
Right? And, I think one of the big takeaways for me as we dive more into this ethics conversation is that ethics and literacy aren't separate. This is something that
Yeah.
you've been saying throughout our iterative process on this development of this particular experience, is that I think sometimes people are like, okay, the ethics is like, does it recognize black faces? And like, we can kind of set that off to the side. And then, but just like, we're just getting a tutoring program. That's different. As we just saw, the decisions that we may be offloading to AI are ethical decisions. And in order to even consider offloading some of those things, and are we even going to offload them? In order to consider involving AI in some of those decisions, we need to, like, that's part of the literacy of it.
Yeah.
The ethics of it is part of the literacy of it.
Yeah, and I think pulling it back to some of that too is acknowledging that there is a person at the center of that. Not only is there a person at the center of that decision, there's also a person on the other end of the receiving end of your decision to use the LLM or whatever AI is too, right? And
Yeah.
so that question around biases, that question around privacy, they're not just about like implementation questions or usage questions.
Yeah.
There are downstream effects of how we might use this with school participants, with learners, with fellow teachers, in a school district, in museums, libraries, whatever it winds up being.
Yep.
And so I think we need to deeply consider the fact that like we are keeping our humanness at the center of the decision, and we are keeping other people's humanness at the center of that decision as well. It's not just us making a decision in isolation.
Part of that sort of like, I'm acknowledging your feelings language that it used was like, I understand how this matters to you because your academic performance matters to you. And ultimately, if a student is recommended for tutoring or not, depending on how that tutoring program works, does that mean they're getting pulled out of another class? Are they losing their music hour? Are they losing PE
Correct.
for additional tutoring?
Right.
Is it over-recommending certain kinds of students or under-recommending others? This is not just a tutoring recommendation. This is a kid's time. This is their life is lived at school. This is our job when we're there. They don't have a choice. The truancy officer will bring them back if they leave, right?
Yeah.
So like, this is not just, hey, should this kid get an extra worksheet every week? This is a kid's life.
Yeah.
And so not just centering, I think sometimes, especially teachers, we're prone to giving of our time and giving of ourselves and whatnot. And for me, it's actually easier when I think about we need to keep a human at the center of this. I'm like, oh, not it couldn't be me. Like, I'm not the center of attention. I mean, I'm on screen a lot, but I don't need to be the center of attention. It's just fun and nice.
Yeah.
But like thinking about it as like, who's at the center of this? The kid, the student,
Right.
their experience. It's how, the one teacher said, how is this going to make my job easier, right? How is this going to affect your students' experience of learning,
Yes.
of their own view of themselves? I mean, I think we all remember something a teacher said to us once that made us feel really special or really not special. And those things really stick with you. And what if instead of Mrs. Anderson saying that to me, what if Google said that to me?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And like, does it matter more or less? I think it's a little bit contextual, but like the human at the center of this is us and our time.
Yeah.
And it's really our students too. So who do we trust to make those ethical decisions for our students?
Completely. Because I think at the end of the day, and not to be sort of reductionist about it, but like teachers are relationship builders, right? And I think that demands that like that human at the center of your decision acknowledges the human on the other end of that decision.
Yeah.
If, we're talking about teachers using AI for whatever purpose, right?
Yeah.
And so there's like there's a human to human connection that I think is really significant there, which I think comes back to for me, the poetry question up front, right? That like poetry is not just the words on the page, right? But it is like the process of making it. Someone crafted that, someone felt that, someone experienced that. And so I think that there's a recognition of a human to human connection that is very real, that's not just deciphering letters to make words on a page, right? Or entering a text into an LLM to make a homework assignment, right? But that like teaching and learning is something very relationship based. And so how do we maintain a human-centered process throughout that?
Yeah, learning is a process, not a product.
Correct. Yes.
So thanks for joining us over here for our cozy little chat. And why did we do this? Well, I don't know. I recently encountered the phrases like, are you a think to talker or a talk to thinker? And for those talk to thinkers like me, I got to talk about it in order to think deeply about it. A book, I love reading a book, but I haven't really read the book until I've argued with someone else about it, right?
Right.
And I hope that you've got teacher friends and administrator friends and other friends who you could sit down and talk with about the ethics of AI in the classroom, and not just the little like snippets of conversation that you have when you're sitting down waiting for that PD that you're not looking forward to, but like the real conversation where you can sit down and get cozy and be like, all right, let's look at this thing together and let's figure out whether or not we trust it. Let's figure out what it's doing,
Right. Yes.
Thanks for having this conversation
Thank
with
you.
us.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, we'll join you back on the other side. There we are. So if you guys had any reflections about the ethical dilemma that you put in there for your LLM and what it said, if you had any observations about your experience with that, please feel free to put those in the chat. Plus, we're going to launch one more whiteboard now. And this one is kind of our culminating one. We would love to hear, let's see. Here we go. All right, so we're going to launch another whiteboard here, and this is sort of our culminating question here. What did you learn today, and then what questions do you have? So feel free to write on some of these sticky notes here, and as you're writing on this final whiteboard here, a couple of last things to share with you guys. We do have another webinar coming up next month in March. It is on March 18th because February has 28 days. So the third Tuesday is again the 18th in March from 7 to 8 p.m. And that one is going to be on Google Teachable Machine and using Teachable Machine with some robots. So join us for that in March. We're going to have some fun with hummingbird kits and microbits and thinking about how to do that together. So you can check out that link on the document. We've also got some free student shows coming up this week. We've got robot aerobics on Thursday. So if you want to sign up for those, a couple spots left. And then we just established some new shows on March 26th. So you guys are the first ones to get to sign up for Robot Rovers on March 26th. So check those out. That's on your learning doc as well. Plus, if something like this deeply engaging in AI conversations is something that you'd like to do with your organization, your school, your district, your local library, whatever the case may be, please let us know. We do professional development like this for organizations all the time. We'll bring Jordan back. He's local now. Yay, you're not in Lithuania or Slovenia. A different,
Much closer.
Is it?
Well, being here than being there.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
I was I don't know how far away Lithuania is versus Slovenia.
No,
unfortunately.
No. Being in Pittsburgh is much closer than being in Slovenia.
So much closer. But we'll bring Jordan back. If this is an experience you'd like to host for your school, let us know. And then feel free to subscribe to our newsletter to be the first to know about all of our cool stuff. Checking out our whiteboard here. What's something someone learned? Hey, I need to change the settings in my LLM.
Building literacies. That's what we're doing, right?
Yeah,
That's okay.
absolutely. Yeah. For sure. That definitely inspired me to be like, now, what data are you collecting now?
Yep, correct.
How about this one? Who is the person that I will talk to?
Oh,
That is
that's a good
a
one.
great question.
Yes. Yeah.
Talk to Jordan. Talk to me. Talk to your
Talk to us.
friends.
Yeah.
Too, for sure. I think having somebody that you can, oftentimes my person is Matt, and we'll talk on the drive home and argue, and he'll be like, I was reading this book, and I'll be like, I was listening to this podcast. He lets me call him radio programs, so I sound old-timey. But
That's a good one.
finding somebody to talk to and argue about and think deeply about this stuff with, I think it's so valuable because like my little brain only has time to think about it so much. So
Yeah.
talking about this with you, hearing your, more global perspectives on everything is really helpful.
Oh, that's kind. But I think it's part of the productive struggle, right? I mean, it's part of the working through the questions that you have and knowing that you can get some feedback. So that's part of the process.
Yeah, this is a good one too. Ethics and literacy are two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that is a takeaway for you.
Good. I'm so glad.
Great. Well, I'll go ahead and close this whiteboard down here. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. We really enjoyed learning with you. Thank you so much, Jordan, for joining us.
Thank you.
This was rad.
A joy to be here. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, everybody. If you have any questions or want to chat about anything, we'll keep the Zoom going for a couple extra minutes. But other than that, enjoy the rest of your night. We'll let you know when this recording is available, and we'll see you next time. Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone. Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Like lion's breath situation.
Yeah.
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 I have been making a deliberate choice to not be on my phone and read more.
Like books.
Books
Like with
have
paper.
been bringing me joy with actual paper.
Yeah, oh, have you not seen those? What's been bringing me joy lately? To be honest, baked potatoes.
I should have just gotten like a dumb phone. Is that true?
Yeah, Big Banana. Doesn't want you to know this.
Big banana.
I love a potato. I love all forms of potato.
Wow.
Like an old brick, like a jitterbug.
A jitterbug? Are you putting stuff on the potatoes?
So much stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
okay.
I try to get off my phone and then my stupid brain finds workarounds to be on it some more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's real addiction behavior. It's like a flip phone for old people. That's what
That'd be great.
Unless any of you have it, and then it's for hip, young, cool people. And Lisa agrees potatoes are full of joy, so Lisa's on Team Potato.
Of course she does.